Hi everybody, this is me again, Dr. Sharon Shahaf, and I want to talk to you again about the academic writer's block. Last time I covered the silences and the taboo status around even bringing up or talking about writer's block in academic setting, and today I want to talk a little bit more about the kind of academic environment that fosters all sorts of problems and struggles with writing, as well as what I want to call the bad advice that is out there for academic writers. So speaking of the academic environment as less than ideal for writers or basically for humans, many people have done work talking about the kind of neoliberal, soul-crushing, ball-smashing environment that academia has become and maybe always has been. It's an environment that is all about critique, and we all critique each other all the time, and we all read each other with an eye out for finding how to pull and push on someone's argument and in order to make it better. But humans being what they are, many times that becomes a fertile ground for abuse. I want to there is so much to say about this, but I just want to zoom in on one area, one dynamic that really starts at graduate school that I think underlies a lot of emotional problems that are at the heart of writer's block. And writer's block is many times an emotional issue more than anything else. And that is the dynamic of sibling rivalry. That you can be an only child and still going into especially graduate school, going into a PhD or maybe even an MA environment, you can get triggered with that kind of family dynamic of sibling rivalry and this economy of scarcity. So let me explain. In this dynamic, the professor becomes this resource like mommy or daddy. It's particularly bad for female professors on you know what I'm talking about, that motherly role that gets projected onto female professors many times. So what I'm trying to say is that not that your professors are actively trying to create that dynamic, but of course, if they are narcissistic, and many of them are horrible narcissistic people, they actually thrive on fostering that dynamic. But basically, whether they want to or not, or are aware of it or not, many times in graduate education, either in a PhD seminar or, there is this competition about getting to work with this one person that everybody wants to work with as an advisor, people get super triggered. And what I mean by that is that the part that gets activated in us is kind of like our most vulnerable, youngest part. And that is also the part that really is in charge of our creativity. So, bear with me here. Theories of creativity talk about how we tap into this inner child or the inner writer, the inner artist. And this is a very young part. Very vulnerable. So we come into a PhD program and we really want to impress and we want to be, all that. And we find ourselves in this sibling rivalry. And if you are a parent, you know that, as the person that triggers the rivalry sometimes has really little to do with it. And mommy loves everybody the same or different or whatever. But what I am talking about is the hook. And when people get triggered and they are not in a family dynamic, they're in a dynamic where indeed they are called upon to constantly prove themselves. It sets up this fraught emotional landscape on which people kind of, are navigating their way around academia from day one. So pay attention to that as you, and this continues, it can go into the tenure track. Definitely when you're trying to get that tenure job and that becomes so competitive, that dynamic of comparing and contrasting and constantly competing with people is just setting you up to be in this emotionally fraught and vulnerable place. So that's one thing I wanted to point out. But with that in mind, let me talk about the main thing I want to talk about today, which is the bad advice that circulates. I I'm not trying to say I'm the only person with good advice for academic writers, but I will tell you that when I started looking for books specifically targeted at academic writers, to try to help my students and my own self, it's very, very hard to find books that do anything except for the following, which is the kind of bad advice that you get in academia. The only advice can be distilled to this message that's actually really belittling and disempowering. And that message says, quit your whining, put your ass in the chair and write. You know, a good example of this is Daniel De Silva, I think, book, How to Write a Lot. And, you know, this is a cisgender, I think, you know, white male. And from reading the book, I think he has a cat. So, you know, he doesn't have family. He doesn't have a lot of struggles that many of us have. And he's like, writing is the act of flapping your hands on a keyboard. I think that this is harmful advice. I think it's insulting advice. I don't think that writing is ever distilled to this. This is like maybe 10% of writing. It's a deep, profound process that you need to understand, make room for, and honor. And if we're going to pretend that if you are struggling with writing, then your problem is that you are not disciplined or that you do not know how to manage your time, I take offense with that, English. I think it's lazy advice. And I think it's debilitating advice, and that it shames you. It's trying to shame you into productivity and to tell you that if you struggle, then the only imaginable problem could be lack of discipline. Well, let me tell you this. If you got yourself into a PhD program, if you got yourself into an MA program, and if you finish your PhD program and you got yourself a tenure track job, you are not lazy. You do not lack discipline, and you know how to manage your time already. Sometimes you can have perfect time management, techniques and work really hard and sit there forever, and you are still blocked and you are still stuck and you're not making progress. And maybe you are just so depleted, and you're actually depleting yourself by trying to continue to apply the same kind of self-discipline practices, that you're not paying attention to the fact that it's not working. So, I always tell clients and students, if you only have a hammer, right, and you are hammering away, and it's not getting you anywhere, then maybe it's time to find a feather, or some other instrument. Find a different approach. Another good piece of advice that I got from a therapist that I found really helpful one time was, when you start struggling, she talked to me about quicksand. When people are in quicksand, she said, the mistake they make is they start, struggling and thrusting their body around, and they sink quicker. And what you really need to do is to lay back and relax. So, very hard to do. And, she was talking about anxiety and depression, but it's very similar to what you need to do when you are beginning to struggle with your writing. So, if you started struggling with your writing and you go and look for a book for academic writers and you're being told, oh, you're lazy, just quit your whining and put your ass in the chair. And if you put your ass in the chair and you just write, you're going to blast through your block. It really reminds me, kind of disgusting, but the week when we watched the Kavanaugh hearing, and the Republican white male senators kept saying, ram it through. The ram it through approach to writer's block is 9 times out of 10. If you're not really blocked, maybe it can work. But if you are really suffering from writer's block, you're at a point where you have exhausted yourself. You've taxed mind, body. You've already done everything that you know how to do that involves self-discipline and self-forcing. And this stuff is just gonna get you, further down, the quicksand, or, the swamp, or wherever it is. So I would say my first point of, my first critique of that advice is that you need to do the opposite. You need to learn how to just, stop, drop, and roll. Name that you are being stuck and that it's not working. Now I'm going to actually recommend a couple of books. So this wonderful book, Around Writer's Block, Using Brain Science to Solve Writer's Resistance, from Roseanne Ben, has a really, really good, beautiful section about brain chemistry and what happens in your brain when you start struggling and when you're resisting, and then beautiful interventions that foster an idea of process over product orientation, and short periods. So anyways, read it. It's a great book, and Roseanne Bain is great. And the other one is On Being Stuck, Tapping into the Creative Power of Writer's Block by Lorraine Herring. These books are not from the library of advice book for academic writers. They are from the body of work that is aimed at, writers in general. And that is my last advice. Go out, go to the bookstore, go to the Barnes & Noble section on reference, go on Amazon and start looking for these kind of books that have advice for writer's block that is not for academic advice, academic writers, and you will find really good, useful advice. Meanwhile, if you are struggling, you are not lazy, you are not devoid somehow at this point in your career of time management skills, there is something else going on. You might be triggered by many different things, and the best thing you can do for yourself is, as I said before, stop, drop, and roll. Acknowledge and name that you are blocked or you are struggling or there is some hindrance and something is not adding up. Maybe you're burnt out, maybe you're depleted, maybe you are just exhausted and you need to take a break, and start, afresh with a new eye and, look for different resources and different approaches. But the ass in the chair is lazy advice. Oh, another one, just last one before I finish. The just finish it advice. I can talk about that in a separate video. Just finish it. Oh, okay. I just didn't know to finish it because you didn't tell me just finish it. So everybody that's just telling you, quit your whining, and just put your ass in the chair and just finish it, can go, So be very sweet to yourself and very self-compassionate. Do not try to self-force. Do not try to self-discipline. If you've reached a point where this has stopped working, it's not going to start working all of a sudden when it stopped. So there are other things you can do. I'm going to continue to compile my resources. I'm going to offer a free webinar, and I'm going to offer classes online, hopefully by next fall. Sooner if the demand is really big. But meanwhile, I'm writing this as a book, so more for me soon. And happy writing, everybody. And really be kind and good to yourself. If you're stuck, just stop.